Hi everyone, my name is Doug Canfield and this is the Mountaineers Books web series. This evening our presenter is Bill Thorness. He's the author of Cycling the Pacific Coast, the complete guide from Canada to Mexico. The Pacific Coast bike route, of course, is one of the very most popular long-distance cycling routes in the US, and Bill is a super resource for those of us who dream about this ride. Tonight, he'll give us a taste of what he knows about riding it successfully, either in one go or in sections. And by the way, our web series presentations are offered almost every month. We usually do them about this time, about the third week of the month. So check back with us to see what's coming up. If there's a presentation on a day you can't attend, feel free to register anyway, because we'll email you a recording of the presentation that you can watch at a time that's convenient. So Bill Thorness is a professional writer, and lucky for us, he writes about his favorite activities. In this case, of course, that means riding on two wheels as often as he can. In addition to his new book, Cycling the Pacific Coast, Bill is also the author of Biking Puget Sound, as well as two books about gardening, which is another one of his passions. And those are Cool Season Gardener and Edible Heirlooms. All of Bill's books are available wherever books are sold. Tonight's presentation is co-hosted by Mountaineers Books, the Mountaineers, and Cascade Bike Club, which is headquartered in Seattle, just a stone's throw away from our very own Mountaineers Program Center. And I know very well that Cascade Bike Club is an awesome organization because it's a big advocate for cyclists in Western Washington, and I use the infrastructure that it's advocated for to commute on my own trip home every day. So welcome, Cascade Bike Club members. It's great to have you. Bill's presentation will run about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer period. Feel free to submit questions at any time during the presentation in the question box that you can see on the right side of your screen. So let's get started. Welcome, Bill. Take it away.
Epic is a ribbon of highway clinging to bluffs high above a craggy shore, hulking sea stacks, dark rock looming over the crashing waves, or a towering redwood forest absorbing all sounds and shielding you from the rain. Epic is hours of steady climbing among winding switchbacks and the wind whistling through your helmet as you whiz down the other side, or fording a mighty river on a steep, too narrow bridge, spotting a city skyline, then putting it in the mirror. Epic is a boardwalk cafe with fish tacos and iced tea after a long morning ride. Pairing up with a ride with a new cycling friend met on the route, or washing off the road salt in a pounding surf. Epic is self-supported pedal-powered travel on America's Pacific Coast. Thank you all for joining in this webinar. It's the first one I've ever done. I'm pretty excited about trying out this new technology, new to me. And sharing with you the story of this book and this route and my research in getting to it. This is great format because you don't have to be in Seattle or in Portland or in Los Angeles or the Bay Area or any other place that I'm going to be giving live presentations. I do have on my website, bikingpugetsound.com, a list of all those presentations that are live. So if you are in any one of those places, come out and see me on one of the live shows. So let's get started. This trip is a bucket list item for a lot of people. It's a pretty long ride, as you can see. That's about 1,850 miles from Vancouver, BC to the Mexico border. There's a few hundred more miles in there if you take all the city tours that I've added in the book and the side trips to the wine country or to the islands that you can visit in the Pacific Northwest. There are a lot of detours and diversions along the way as well. A lot of people say this is the most beautiful ride in America. It's certainly the most popular for touring cyclists in America, according to the Adventure Cycling Association, and they have 31 rides that will take you across the country. So the first thing people ask me when they see this route and this ride is, how long is this going to take you? Well, for a guidebook author, 2 years. It took me about 2 years of research to chart the route, ride the route, some places numerous times, and then come up with the route that I wanted to share. It is kind of based on the Adventure Cycling Association's map set of the Pacific Coast route with my add-ins and changes. If you were to do it straight through, riding 40 to 60 miles a day, which is my recommended length for the routes in the book, it would take you 37 days if you didn't take a day off or have a breakdown of your bike or your body. But where is the fun in that? I mean, going down this trail, the adventure is on the trail. It's not having done the route. So take a little more time. I recommend 2 months as a nice amount of time to maybe take 1 day off per week. That's what a lot of adventure cyclists do. You'll find diversions that you want to explore. Go and hit those and visit friends in San Francisco or Portland or wherever you are along the way that you want to stop and enjoy it. So how many of us have 2 months to take time off, or 37 days even? Not many. So I've devised the book into sections so that you could take a week or 2 weeks and do parts of it and then go back and pick up the rest of it later. So for instance, if you just have a week, you might take that Vancouver to Seattle section or the Seattle to Astoria section. You can fit in some side trips and city tours as well. If you have 2 weeks, you could do Northern California from the Oregon border to San Francisco, or you could do San Francisco to San Diego in that amount of time. So what I'm going to do now is show you a bunch of pictures of the route in the book, and going north to south, we'll start in Vancouver, BC. People also ask, well, do I have to go north to south, or can I fly into LA and bike to Seattle? Well, you could, but you'd be bucking the wind the whole way. The prevailing winds during the cycling season really are going to be behind you if you bike north to south. So I would certainly recommend that. Here is the very beginning of the route. This is the base of Cypress Street in the Kitsilano neighborhood in Vancouver, BC, a very old totem pole. And there I am getting ready to take off on one of my research trips. The best 2 years of working vacations I've ever had. So we do not do justice to Canada in this book. I will own up to that, or even to British Columbia, or even to southern British Columbia. There is tons of great riding up there. But the route heads south from Vancouver, and so that's what we're doing. If you were to go south, you can take a couple of directions, though. The main route heads you through Vancouver and out. And before you leave the city, I really recommend that you take a little city tour of Vancouver. I've done city tours for each of the 6 major cities along the route, and it'll take you around all the great spots, the highlights of the center of the city and a couple of neighborhoods in each one. This one will take you to Granville Island, where you can have a really nice lunch in a historic sort of farmer's market area, go around the seawall and Stanley Park and a lot of great biking neighborhoods as well. If you head straight south for the border, you'll go across the big Alex Fraser Bridge, and then you'll hit the American border at Blaine. There is another route you could take. You can take a big British Columbia ferry across to Vancouver Island, and then you'd be going down the Saanich Peninsula down to Victoria. And this is the Lochside Trail heading south from the Sydney area down to Victoria. You could stop off at Sydney and pick up the Washington State ferries, and you'd go to the San Juan Islands. This is Cattle Point on San Juan Island. You could take a couple of days and visit the islands. I've got routes on the islands there in the book as well as a side trip, and then pick up the main route again. If you're back to the main route, you'd stop in Bellingham on the way south. This is my favorite neighborhood in Bellingham, the Fairhaven district. And then you'd head south on Chuckanut Drive, which is a wonderful drive, and it has a really high point here, which is an oyster farm. Taylor Shellfish Farms will sell you the shellfish, the barbecue briquettes, and all the stuff you need to take a break from your cycling and have a really great freshly grilled shellfish lunch. Doesn't that look like fun? It really is a great place to stop. I can't let you go by my town of Seattle without enticing you to come for another city tour. So on the way south, why not stop off for a day? You'd have to take just a little bit of a detour off the route, which runs along the Hood Canal. It doesn't really actually go all the way out to the coast through this section of Washington. And it's just a ferry ride away to get into Seattle, go through Pike Place Market here on this picture and a bunch of other high points around the Space Needle and some of our floating bridges and some of our cool neighborhoods and old part of the city to check it out. When you go through Washington, you might notice that you're not seeing the ocean a lot. It kind of goes along Hood Canal, which is an inland waterway, although it is saltwater, and then heads southwest toward the southern coast of Washington and into Oregon. Meanwhile, you'll be kind of looking at this. Trees, valleys, mountains in the distance, maybe some cloud cover. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The route takes you down through a little town called Raymond, which has a nice bike trail through town and all these old rusty cutout sculptures of various characters along the way. And then finally, along the Willapa Bay and into the Long Beach Peninsula, where you get this fantastic little trail. It's 6 miles of asphalt right along the beach and just beach grass between you and the ocean. It takes you down to Cape Disappointment State Park, which is where Lewis and Clark finally ended up on their voyage of discovery in 1805. And from there, it's just a short hop into Oregon over this giant bridge. This is the Astoria-Megler Bridge. Takes you from Washington to Oregon across the Columbia River. And it's a pretty daunting bridge. It's 4 miles long. Most of it's flat. It goes right along the water, but you can see on the far side, there's kind of a climb. There's a big climb up, in fact. And this gives me a chance to talk a little bit about the bridges that you'll see along the way and some of the riding that you'll do on these roads. One of the first things that people always ask me is, isn't this dangerous? You're along the roads and the traffic is out there, and I'd be scared of all that traffic. Well, yes, you will be with the traffic. In the photo on the left, there's a very common situation. You can see that these cyclists are on the side of the road. There's not much of a shoulder to bike on, so they'd be biking in the lane. And there's an RV, I like to call them land yachts, that are going by fairly regularly, especially in Northern California and the Oregon coast. You'll see a lot of RVs. In the right photo, here's a family coming down the other side of a bridge with the traffic sort of blocked up behind them. There are sections where you'll see shoulder and you'll be comfortably riding along the shoulder. There are also sections where you'll just be riding with traffic in the traffic lane. And my sense in all my riding is that the traffic is fairly used to cyclists. We are not too surprising to them, so we coexist. You'll get used to it, is what most people say. You know, yeah, you get used to the traffic. People pull around you when you've got a lot of traffic behind you that has sort of built up. You pull over to the side of the road occasionally and let the traffic go by. You will notice in both of these photos that all the cyclists are smiling. So you get down the road, you get used to that kind of traffic. But I do recommend that you take a couple of days and load up your bike and go out into this kind of traffic situation, wherever you might live, and just try it out and see if you can be comfortable with it, because you really do need to be. You need to know. You might see this, a big logging truck. You might see these narrow old tunnels and a climb along a very narrow road. This tunnel, the bike lane on the edge there looks great, right? It disappears right at this entrance to that tunnel. So you press the button, the lights light up on both ends of the tunnel, telling motorists that there are cyclists in the tunnel, and you just bike like heck to get through there. It's not very long. There's 2 or 3 of these along the route. They're not very long. You can see the other end and get out in and out in a minute or so. And some of these old roads they were built, in the 1930s or 40s. They're clinging to the side of a hillside like this. This one on the right actually has a little lane for us. Here's one that really doesn't. So you can see the road snaking along and hugging that hillside, and you have these incredible views. You're going to climb as fast as you can climb, and the cars around you are just going to deal with it. So that's what I like to warn you about regarding traffic. So let's go down into Oregon. So Oregon, okay, I live in Washington, but Oregon really has it all for coastal cycling. I have to admit it. I'd love it if I could say Washington was the best, but Oregon is really there. They have a coastal route that is well signed with the Oregon Coast Bike Route. They have lots of hiker-biker campgrounds. So if you go into a hiker-biker campground, like on the right, you'll pay $5 if you show up on your bike, and be given a space within a sort of a corral with all the other cyclists who are camping there. You make friends this way. You share a picnic table and maybe a fire ring. There are free showers or 50 cents for showers in these campgrounds. They're 40 or 50 miles apart, so an easy day ride between them. And that little picture in the middle shows a really neat little innovation. They have boxes lockable. In some cases, you can lock them, where you can put your food overnight so the critters don't get it. You can even charge up your electronics there. So thank you, Oregon. And there are so many great little towns to pedal through along the way. So the photo on the right is the Astoria-Megler Bridge from the other side. So now you can kind of see what you've got to climb there at the end and then scream down the other side. It's really fun. And then this is downtown Astoria, Oregon, which has bike shops and coffee shops and microbreweries and lots of fun stuff to do on a visit there. These little towns along the coast are some of the greatest fun to bike through. I don't really like to leave all my stuff in my bike when I'm taking a midday break. And these sidewalk cafes and little bakeries along the route in these tiny towns make it very easy to just have a nice visit with the town and stop and have an outdoor lunch or cup of coffee. Beautiful places. But I couldn't send you through Oregon without sending you to Portland any more than I could send you through Washington without enticing you to come to Seattle. Portland is really a great bike town, and they have a lot of infrastructure and a kind of a quirky bike culture there. But it's 90 miles from the coast. So how do you do that? Well, I put in the book routes to and from Portland. So it's a 2-day route into Portland and then a 2-day route back out to the coast from Astoria. Or you can hop on an Amtrak connected bus, and in 3 hours, you'll be in downtown Portland. And then you can take that bus. After a day ride and a tour around Portland included in the book, you can just take that bus right back out to Astoria, pick up your ride again. So you can do it a couple of different ways. The book has all the transit connections for getting in and out of these cities, including the train and air connections. And if there's a bus and train combination, it tells you about that. So you can do these in segments by using the transit as well. But I really encourage you to head to Portland for a little bit of a visit if you're on this route. In fact, I'll be in Portland next week. I'm giving a talk at Powell's Books in the Pearl District in Portland on Thursday night at 7:30. And then on Friday, we're doing a Cycling the Coast happy hour at a microbrewery in Portland. So come out if you're in that neighborhood, come out and see me there. It's on my website on the events page. You'll see links to all of that stuff. When I get going down the coast, I really want to have time to enjoy it and, you know, stop and take a look at where I've been, take a look at where I'm going. This is Hecata Head Lighthouse in the distance, and there's a nice climb getting up to that. This is one of the many capes along the coast. You'll see part of the coast has the Three Capes tour, and I'm riding that along, and I realized cape is just another four-letter word for hill. So whenever you see cape, you know you've got a climb coming. And it's up and down, up and down. You get a time to rest on one of these vistas, and it's just fantastic. That's one reason that I made the routes 40 to 65 miles long, so that you can cycle all day, but take a long break, take a long lunch, go visit, you know, along here there's a place called the Sea Lion Caves. You take a little elevator from the parking lot down to look at the caves, and the sea lions are barking, and they're very stinky, and what fun. In Central Oregon, you bike along a national park that is sand dunes, the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area. And the dunes stretch from the ocean out to the road, sometimes over the road. And then you come to neat little towns like Yachats. This town has a kind of a quirky combination of organic farmers and fishing fishing hippies. It's really a really kind of a neat. If there's anyone from Yachats listening, I say that with love. It's a really fun place, and I really like the town. When you get into Southern Oregon, you see a lot of art, big art in some cases. That's Avery the Eagle outside of Bandon, Oregon, and Henry the Rockfish. They are both made out of sea junk. So there's this organization that collects tons and tons of floating sea garbage off the beach and makes art out of it. Incredible things to see as you go down. You might see fanciful creatures created out of wood or other materials. You would have to have a very big Weber kettle to grill this baby, the world's largest oyster. And you might even have to battle some Jurassic creatures to get your bicycle back. I duked it out with this guy and headed down the road with no scars visible. So let's talk about California. Oh man, this is a route that has pretty much all the terrain and climate changes that you could expect to experience on the coast. Northern California, from Crescent City to San Francisco, contains one of my very favorite areas to bike through, and that is the redwoods, the redwood forests. There's a linked series of state and national forests filled with giant old redwood trees, and these things are just incredible. You bike through this area. There are a couple of roads where that are parallel basically to the highway. So all the fast traffic goes on the highway, and you and I go as slowly as we can down these lanes, down these roads, with very few cars, other than also drivers going very slowly and really enjoying this. Just tilt your head back, bike as slowly as you can without falling over, and drink in that super oxygenated air that these big old trees generate. get off your bike and walk this forest stuff and hug a tree that might be 300 feet tall and 2,000 years old. It's an incredible place, and I would go back there anytime I get a chance. And you're in and out of these forests and camping there for 2 or 3 days before you hit the coast again after the biggest climb along the coast. This is a slide that reminds me to talk a little bit about the weather. You will see fog, you might see rain, you might want to have your rain gear with you, especially in the Pacific Northwest. Southern California, not so much. You can box it up and ship it home. But the weather in the Pacific Northwest really dictates when you want to take this route. So I recommend taking it, starting in the Northwest in mid-September, and then you'd end up in Southern California if you did the whole thing in mid-November. That way you get the statistically driest time in Washington and Oregon, still plenty warm and lots of sunshine. And the Northern California area, that's a very low fog time in the redwoods. So a really good time to be there. After you get out of the redwoods comes the biggest climb on the route out of Leggett, and you climb what looks like on the elevation profile to be a spike that is straight up. It is not straight up. In fact, it takes hours and hours to get up to the pinnacle of it, but you do have flat areas, flat enough to stop and comfortably take a rest and get up to the other side. But you hear all the cyclists you meet along the way saying, hey, have you ridden Leggett before? What's that like? Oh, I'm wondering if I'm going to make it up Leggett. I biked it one time with a guy who had been backpacking. He kind of was on an ill-fitting bike. He had flat tennis shoes with no clips or baskets to hold his feet in. His backpack was balanced on the back of his bike, and he was wearing a helmet, but it wasn't strapped to his head. And he and I made it up over this thing just fine. So you will too. It's a great climb. And then going down the other side, you really should check your brakes first to make sure you've got good brake pads, because it's quite a screaming ride down the other side. And then you're a couple days in a very quiet area of the coast. You go by Fort Ross, which was actually the site of settlements by Russian people who came down the coast in ships. And now I know, because of learning about this, why the Russian River was named the Russian River. This is the river that comes out of the Napa and Sonoma counties, and you might know those names because of their fantastic wine country in Northern California. Well, time for a wine country detour. I don't get you quite to Napa and Sonoma, which are a little bit difficult to get to on this route from the coast. However, going up the Russian River Valley and into the Dry Creek Valley, two great wine appellations, you'll get a lot of feel for this area of wine growing country. Camp overnight, head back to the coast at Bodega Bay, and resume your route. And from there, you hit Tamales Bay, famous for its oysters. You go by Point Reyes Station, where the Cowgirl Creamery will tempt you with a gourmet picnic. You hit the suburbs and the bike trails in the towns going into the Bay Area, and then finally in the distance, there it is. It's orange, it's large, it's the Golden Gate Bridge, and you have arrived in San Francisco. What a feeling of accomplishment I get when I hit a milestone like this on this kind of a route. All I've had to do was oil my chain, feed my body, get up every day out of my sleeping bag, and pedal again. Nobody else's schedule, no tickets to buy for planes or trains or automobiles, and no gasoline stations to gas up at or anything like that, man. We're just on our own, and you make it. A lot of people stop in San Francisco, and if you do that route to San Francisco, you've got a great flavor for the coast. But I'm going to entice you to hopefully continue on the ride, the southern part of the state. But of course, you need to bike San Francisco as well. You know, it's a city of 49 hills, and you could really work your legs on this thing. But I've figured out a route to just orient yourself around the city and see a lot of the tourist sites and things, and some great neighborhoods using only one of those hills. So on the right is the Mission Dolores, the oldest building in San Francisco, very historic. These neighborhoods are biking neighborhoods, are signed well with bike tour routes through them. Really a great place to visit as well. So now Central and Southern California, from San Francisco Bay Area, you have some more wild riding in the Big Sur neighborhood, and then on to the megalopolis of Southern California. So Northern California, getting in south of the Bay, is still wild. I love to stop and just check out the wildlife along the coast whenever I see one of these little picnic tables along the side of the road in a little park. And there's plenty of time to do that. Monterey is a very cool town that you go through, and Carmel by the Sea, that with its famous 17-mile drive. This is Cannery Row in Monterey, and its waterfront. Cannery Row, made famous by John Steinbeck, who grew up in Salinas, just a few miles away and inland. And if you went down here from Monterey, you'd hit the Big Sur area, and it looks kind of like this. So this is Big Sur climate. It's dry, it's hilly, it's a winding road hugging the coastline again. You could go down this road, but you'd have to turn around, because right now the Big Sur area had a big slide area. See the road going along, and then the road stops, and then the road starts up again. That's because the Mud Creek landslide happened after the winter rains of 2016. They're building a new road, or maybe I should say cape, over this. I'm sure it'll be another nice climb for us. But right now, you can't get through. So the Adventure Cycling Association is very good at putting up detours on their website when they have this kind of stuff happen, and it does happen. You have to keep up with the news on the route. There are also slides sometimes around the Malibu Hills area. But you'd have to go back to Monterey and go inland for a 3-day route to back out to San Luis Obispo, or bike 10 miles to Salinas and pick up Amtrak, and you'll be in San Luis Obispo in 3 or 4 hours. And then you can bike back out to the coast. You could bike north on the coast a little bit, go to Hearst Castle and some other sites in that area, Cambria and San Luis Obispo, a great biking town. And then from there, you really get your reward, because this is what you're going to see. It flattens out to the border, almost to Mexico. You have very few hills left to climb, and you just bike along the coast in the warm climates, sometimes too warm if you hit it at the wrong time. And sometimes the Santa Ana winds come up and they start wildfires, and you've got to be careful about that. So it's a challenge, but it's also a beautiful area to visit if you are going to head to Southern California. Here's another wine country side trip that I've devised right around the Santa Barbara area. This is the Santa Ynez Valley, and no, that is not Copenhagen, although I would love to bike in Copenhagen someday soon. That is the little tiny Danish-themed town of Solvang, where this is the jumping off point for the Santa Ynez Valley wine country tour. And then you're into Santa Barbara, beautiful old mission that's been restored and kept up, wonderful waterfront bike and pedestrian trail. And from there, Southern California is beach run. There aren't very many campgrounds in Southern California. I believe the reasons for this is there have just been too many people, a lot of transient people. It's just overfilled. So there are very few hiker-biker campgrounds. This is one of them. And you just travel across the road and you're at the beach. I recommend spending as much time as you can kicking around the beaches of Southern California. But you'll only have this one and one more campground right outside of San Diego to use. Otherwise, you'll be looking for motels along the road. And you'll see scenes like this. So you're biking along the road that might be a little bit inland from the actual beach itself, except for when there are state beach surfing beaches and things that are state beaches. Otherwise, the land is taken up by a lot of communities that build right up to the water. So it's private and you see the water between the homes as you bike along there, unfortunately. But when you get to Los Angeles, there's a giant bike trail that takes you right into the city and right along the edge of one of the biggest cities in the US. People say, I'm not biking in Los Angeles, but you know what? You can, and you would enjoy it. This bike trail runs right along the beach, all the way through the city and almost to Long Beach. You've got a couple of neighborhoods to go through to go from Los Angeles to Long Beach. But before you leave town, stop at Santa Monica. There's Santa Monica Pier in the upper photo. You can rack your bike overnight securely at Bike Station Santa Monica that will rent you space indoors overnight for the bike, get a hotel, and bike out to Hollywood, bike to LACMA, their great museum. Go to the old farmers market. It's very historic, and there are studios and Hollywood productions going on all around you. I've got a nice route through the western part of LA before you get out. When you head south, you're going to go along this wide bike pedestrian walkway along the beach. You'll be dodging people with surfboards and actresses on rollerblades and plenty of other tourists and people riding rental bikes. But you're not on the streets and you're not on the highway until you get south of LA and south of Long Beach. And then there's a really nice section of coastal trails and roadside grade separated bike lanes that take you almost all the way to San Diego. It's a nice combination, and you'll see scenes like this, surfers in the foreground and big oil derricks in the background along Huntington Beach, and statues to surfing and a couple of nice little campgrounds and some very beautiful communities like Newport Beach, where they have wonderful, lush city parks for breaks along the way through these built-up areas along the coast. And then you get to San Diego, and this is the last of the 6 big cities along the way. Great place for biking. Balboa Park, where their art museum is, and Cabrillo National Monument. You climb the hill to overlook the city. You can see the naval operations there. The U.S. Navy is really big in San Diego. Take a ferry over to Coronado and you bike down the Silver Strand here. That takes you down to the last little tiny town in California, Chula Vista, sometimes called Tijuana North, I think, and then you're at the border. You see that big, beautiful Mexican flag flying over the border on the other side. And, you could keep going. It's only 5,000 miles to Peru. I recommend that you you like that one, huh? I recommend that you turn around, though, go down to the transit station at the border and hop the light rail back into San Diego and enjoy your achievement. Really, charting this route from Vancouver, BC to the Mexico border was really a voyage of discovery for me. I've valued the camaraderie of so many other bicycle travelers along the way. I explored in depth many places that I'd only briefly seen at before, and I'm going at a gentle pace of 10 to 15 miles an hour. I also discovered a real wild, massive coastline and a landscape that's really left me with a deep, enduring sense of place. The Pacific Coast is really a treasure trove of memories and experiences that you can have on a bike. I hope you'll venture out there and make room for that wild coast inside of you as well. And with that, I'll end the presentation, and I'd love to take some questions and hear what you want to know more about.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Bill. Loved your photos. We do have a handful of questions, and there's some about the route itself and routing, but a couple of them, there's two that are about budget. So now Natalia asks, what did you use for a budget, or what's reasonable? And Perry has a similar question, budget per day, assuming occasional hotel stays.
Hi there. Great questions. You know, it can be an expensive vacation, especially if you stay in motels every night or if you're really out there for a long time. I calculated it out that if you camped most of the time and you use these hiker biker campgrounds, which can be $5 a night, most of them, you could do this route, and you had lunch once a day at a cafe along the road, and then you picked up your dinner and on the way into the campground, and you cooked breakfast and dinner in your campgrounds, which is very easy to do, by the way, because you're biking through a town or services very near almost all the campgrounds. If you did that, you could do the route with about maybe $2,000 in expenses. If you're going to credit card tour and stay in hotels a lot, things like that, it's going to ratchet up from that. You can't get a motel room along the coast, most places under maybe $65, $75 a night. So it could really add up, as you can see. But you can do it either way. Let's see, what was the second part of that question?
Well, I think you answered it. It was a budget per day, but $2,000.
Budget per day. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, a budget per day, it could be as inexpensive as $20 or $30 based on buying most of your food and just the bike camping, or it goes up from there.
Christina asks, is there an easy way to get transport from Eugene, Oregon to the coast if you want to start your tour in Florence?
Well, yes, there is. Let's see. I don't know exactly Florence. I'd have to look at the map exactly. But you can take Amtrak to Eugene, and then from Eugene, there is a regional bus that takes you out to the coast. And there's another regional bus, in fact, that you can pick up that goes down the coast. So the first bus, I think it goes out to Tillamook or Coos Bay. I'm sorry, I'd have to look at the map again. Been a while since I've done that. But then two buses, the second bus takes you all the way down the coast to the Oregon border. So there are options to hit those towns all along the way. If you wanted to go to the coast from Eugene and go north, that I don't believe there is a transit that goes north from there.
Frank asks, what's your favorite part of the route?
Well, I already waxed poetic about the redwoods, but really I would have to say Central Oregon is probably my favorite part. It's got everything. It's got all those great services. It's beautiful there. You see these sea stacks as you're biking along. There's some challenging riding, like climbing up a really epic climb from, I use that word too much probably, from Cape Lookout. And there are these great little towns. Newport's a pretty big little town, but towns like Yachats and some of the other ones are really fun to go through. And check out. So Central Oregon would be very much at the top of my list.
We have a question about camping gear. How much gear do you need to carry for camping?
That's a good question. You know, my total setup that I put on my bike, I've got 2 panniers on the back, 2 on the front, and a little handlebar bag. It weighs about 35 pounds. I carry a small stove with just a little canister of gas, just basically for boiling water and making coffee in the morning and oatmeal, and boiling water for an evening meal that I'll supplement with fresh stuff that I bring in. Um, Really, a tent with a rain fly is very important. A sleeping bag in the Northwest, especially. You can go a lot lighter in Southern California, but you've already got the gear with you if you've been heading down the coast. A lot of people pack too heavily, and you see this very commonly along the way. They'll get a week or two into it, and they'll be looking for a United States Postal Service so they can fill a box with all the stuff that they don't need and ship it back home. A tent, a sleeping bag, and some basic cooking and eating stuff, that's a lot, pretty much all I carry for camping. And a Kindle and a couple of little camp lights so that I can read in the evening and you know, enjoy the evening around the campsite as well.
Okay, my sense is that this question is really searching for, if you can only do one of your city bike tours, what's your favorite city? Well, which one do you recommend for that?
Seattle, I don't know. Boy, they all have such different appeals. Um, San Francisco is such a great tourist town, and there are so many tourists there. Actually, that's the drawback of San Francisco. When you bike across the Golden Gate Bridge, you're going to meet a horde of people on those little rental city bikes that are wobbling all over, and they don't really know how to ride them. You bike very slowly across the beautiful Golden Gate Bridge. So probably San Francisco of all of them. My Seattle friends are just going to shoot me probably, but come to Seattle and take a ride with me. Give me a call and or drop me an email. I love showing people around.
Okay, so Jean has she's interested in the budget still, and is asking in regard to the gear that you're going to carry, what is really worth spending some money on? Maybe that's about quality.
Oh yeah.
But she says, what's worth spending on and what's not worth spending on?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really good question. I think light gear costs more, so you can, and small gear costs more. It's really worth, in my estimation, spending money on a good lightweight tent that will pack down to a small size, and a lighter sleeping bag that you can stuff into a stuff sack and then shrink it down by tightening up, cinching up the sack to a small size, because those things can get so big and the panniers are strapped to the back rack that they just take up a lot of space and make it difficult to carry your clothes and the other stuff that you need. So I'd spend, good money on those things, and you'll be a lot more, you'll be a lot happier with all the packing that you need to do.
Okay, well, we don't have any more questions. Unless anybody else has one, we can call it an evening, and we certainly appreciate all of you coming and attending. Thank you, Bill. That was a lot of fun. I am hoping to do this myself, so I enjoyed hearing it. Let's see. So Cycling the Pacific Coast, it just came out in the fall. It's comprehensive and large and lush, and it's available wherever books are sold. And it's also available on our website, mountaineersbooks.org. And if you use this code, you can get a 20% discount. The code is FUNWHEEL, FUNWHEEL. And I'm going to type that in the comments right now. But don't worry about it. You don't have to. You don't even have to write that down, because in a couple of days, the next couple of days, we'll send you a recording of this presentation and with information, and it'll tell you that discount code again.
And
So let's.
I'm always happy to answer questions via email. So if you have questions about the route or sections or things you want to do, please go to my website and drop me an email.
Okay, so the next webisode, the March webisode, is 1001 Climbing Tips. It features author and elite alpinist Andy Kirkpatrick. Andy will be with us on March 21, and he'll be speaking to us from his home in England. So that'll be kind of fun, be something different. Andy is really funny. He's written a couple of terrific adventure books, as well as this climbing how-to at 1001 Climbing Tips. So if you're a climber or want to be a climber or just interested in climbing, that might be a good one for you. Anyway, thank you all very much. See you again. Bye.